And so if you find out that maybe writing code isn't the thing that you're into, there's nothing wrong with that. Find something that you're actually going to enjoy. Because at the end of the day, when you're getting a job, you're making a career and you're building a career out of this. Do you really want to do something that you're not totally enjoying or liking for the next 20, 30 years? So if we need to make that pivot, let's make a pivot in an area that makes sense. So we'll kind of give you as much information as possible around that. Um, for some of the people online, I've kind of noticed a few things. I want to kind of make this really, really clear. If you're joining us from an area outside of Texas, thank you so much for hanging out with us. You could be an honorary Texan for the night, right? But I will say that a lot of this information and a lot of this advice is going to be very local focused. That doesn't mean this isn't going to apply in your area. It just means I don't know anything about your area to say you should be doing this in your market. If you notice one thing in particular, I've never in my career ever told somebody you need to learn this, this, and this, and it's going to guarantee you a job. Every single market is different, and that's on the side of bad advice. And I'm very, very, very anti bad advice. So do the research into your local markets and see if these ideas apply for you. And if they do, fantastic. If they don't, nothing wrong with that either. So, two things I want to say before we start. Number one, three things rather. Number one, you could literally be anywhere in the world tonight and you decide to hang out with us. Thank you. This is Dallas Software Developers. We're a local group of software developers that kind of all volunteer to kind of give back, hang out, support others in whatever way that we can. Um, we have a very active Discord. So if you're a local developer, highly recommend checking that out. Uh, Tons of people you can kind of connect with. If you join from the meetup page, you can find the link to that there, hopefully. Um, the other thing that I want to say is a huge shout out to our two sponsors, Yum Brands, for giving us the space that we're hanging out in right now. Clap it up for Yum Brands, please, por favore. They probably got the room mic'd and bugged, so just listening. But no, no, seriously, we went to a lot of groups to try and find spaces. They were very accommodating. They've been very flexible. They're really big on trying to support the developer community. They're also hiring some folks right now. So there's a QR code in the on the table over there. If that's something you're interested in, you can at least check out the job listings. There could be maybe something that you're interested in there, so you can check that out. The other sponsor I want to talk about tonight, AppRite. I'm a brand ambassador for AppRite, so slightly biased there, but AppRite, they're killing it. They're the reason why we have the pizza and the drinks and all that other good stuff. So if we can get a huge clap for AppRite, please. Yep, yep, yep. For those that don't know, AppRite is a very similar tool to like MongoDB, but in my opinion, slightly better. They have an amazing community. It's completely open sourced. One of the really, really cool things, actually, probably a better comparison is Firebase, but they have a lot of tools outside of the box. They, do authentication for you. If you wanted to create like a user sign up page, they could literally streamline that entire process for you, including like handling the user passwords and stuff like that. Takes a lot of the stress off you. Plus, they're a security first company, so everything's very secure. Databases, all that good stuff. Their Discord always on fire. Their team that I've dealt with, phenomenal. I fell in love with the tool before I ended up even agreeing to do anything with them. They honestly, great product. I highly recommend it if you're ever interested in it. Check it out. Hacktoberfest is coming up. They're a big, big sponsor for Hacktoberfest. So you can kind of get some open PRs in there and be part of Hacktoberfest with that. You can check out their Discord to learn some stuff. They do office hours and they got bunches of tutorials and stuff like that. Highly recommend that. The last thing that I want to kind of recommend is you're here, right? You're in a room literally and or online. You're in a room literally with people that are interested in the same thing that you're interested in. You're in a room with people that actually came to have conversations. You're also in a room with people that are possibly thinking about getting a new job, wanting to learn the skills to kind of be more marketable. Make those connections before you leave today if you can. You never know what one conversation can take you. It's probably going to be one of the best things that you ever do. Or maybe the conversation leads to nothing. You practice your speaking skills at the same time, right? But I think you're literally in a room with your community. So you might as well tap into that for whatever it is, right? I'm still new to this community, right? I moved to Dallas almost a year ago. And so I'm still meeting people for the first time and having those conversations, and people are finding out about me for the first time. So it's really, really cool to kind of tap into that. Do the same thing for yourself. So with that said, now I think we can start this whole thing up. All right. So I guess before we start anything, let's have the speakers introduce themselves and kind of talk about, why they even decided to be here today.
Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for coming out. Like he said, so many like-minded individuals. But my name is Angie Del Castillo. I am a senior recruiter at JP Morgan Chase. Specifically, I recruit entry-level software engineers coming from non-traditional backgrounds. So really excited to get in the conversation tonight. And a quick disclaimer: I'm not here to endorse JP Morgan Chase, or my reviews are not reflective. Just really excited to speak on my experience, things that I've learned in my 4 years as a recruiter. I'm recruiting for some of the largest household brands in the US.
Hi, I'm Melissa Guerrero, and I am a design manager at Amadeus, as Danny mentioned. I was a teacher for 7 years and then completely changed in 1 year into tech. So it can be done. I'm happy to help you do it. I know there's a lot of former teachers or teachers considering a career change. As much as I love teachers, I totally get it. In this audience, there's been a number of people who have successfully changed, so you can do it too. My title being design manager, we actually do HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and wear a lot of hats. So I'm just happy to be here and help other people get involved in tech.
Hey everyone, my name is Perry Wright, and I am a senior technical sales recruiter at Palo Alto Networks. Actually, been with Palo Alto for the past 2 years, and been recruiting for 8 years total. So I actually started off recruiting on the early and career side, so helping people, transition into tech, whether it was college students or people who wanted to, make a career pivot. So definitely passionate about helping people make that pivot, to be honest, because it can be done, and it's a lot of roles. One thing I realize, it's a lot of roles, it's a lot of jobs out here in the tech space that people just don't know about. So I'm here to ensure that you all learn about it, get exposure to it, and find out how to get your foot in the door.
So, just out of curiosity, because I've had a couple conversations before this, just a show of hands, do you know who I am? So there's some that don't. I just want to know, like, do I need to explain that? So for those that don't know who I am, I'm Danny Thompson. I am a software developer. Uh, the quick rundown is I spent over 11 years of my life frying chicken in gas stations. I learned how to code. It completely changed my life. I've now helped several thousand people land their first jobs in tech. I, I don't monetize it. Like, no one's paying me a check anytime they land a job. It's just to help y'all, because I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for great people. And so I try to do the same things. Meetups were a big reason why I was able to make the transition. It was a big reason why I made the connections that I made and learned the things that I did. And that's a big reason why I'm a part of this, because those sessions, I didn't have money to go to an $800 conference or a lot of those paid sessions. So I went to meetups and I would absorb as much information as I could from the amazing developers that were coming there. So that's kind of why we do this. And you find people like Melissa, who's an admin in the group, or Clint, or Eric, or Devin here, who's donating his time and he's here. They're all developers working in the industry, and they donate their time simply to help folks in whatever way that we can. And I truly thank them from the bottom of my heart, because I don't think we'd be able to do the kind of events that we do. But also, if it wasn't for their selflessness and their volunteering, I don't think we'd be able to make the kind of impact that we've been making, and hopefully continue to do so. Um, so for me, I currently work at AutoZone, kind of like everyone up here. Our thoughts are our own, so don't represent our company, things like that. Make that disclaimer there. But I've worked at some of the largest companies in the world. Most of the organizations that I've ever worked for have been billion-dollar plus organizations. My specialty is the sales funnel, and so I've kind of always done stuff around that. Um, so I kind of will start with the first question, and I'll anyone that wants to take it, they can. We got a lot of people in the room. Why haven't you hired them yet? So, alluding to, what is it when you're sourcing candidates or looking for candidates? What are some of the things or the avenues that you're going down to start finding them? We can start with Angie.
Can you repeat the question?
So, when you're sourcing candidates, what are some of the avenues or tools that you're looking through and utilizing to start finding those candidates?
Yeah, absolutely. So the opportunity that I recruit for has been around for about 2 years. So I was brought in to kind of build it from the ground up. And we really started by connecting with coding boot camps, I don't want to sound biased and name a few, but some coding boot camps. We connect with their careers services personnel. We tell them about the program, learn about their program, what skill set they're teaching, a little bit about their students, where they're located, their demographics, things like that, and just try to organically market the opportunity. We don't pay to get in touch with anyone. We don't charge them to connect with us, but we're just trying to spread the word as much as possible. And over the past 2 years, the word has really organically spread through word of mouth. As people graduate their coding bootcamp, get a job with us, they are now alum. They go back to speak to future cohorts. And then as we hire people, they're spreading the word amongst themselves and almost acting as an extension of my recruiting team, which I can't ask for anything more than my engineers having a positive experience, when they come to get a job, and really just wanting to share that opportunity, because the better of an experience that they have, the more that they're spreading the word for us. So it's almost taken a little bit of a mind of its own, but I would say that's where we started. And now we do a lot of inbound sourcing. So people just hearing about us. We try to hold info sessions to answer any questions, walk people through our interview process. And then whoever wants to apply is really welcome to.
So, you've kind of said a couple times that you've created the program, you've talked about it, but what is like the name of the program? What would they look for if they're trying to even apply to it? Yeah, like your program, what is it called? Like,
Yes. Yeah. So if y'all want to find out, first of all, add me on LinkedIn. I post a lot about the opportunity and culture at JP Morgan Chase. I've been there about 2 years. Absolutely love it. We do a lot in the technology space that's far more innovative than other banks in the industry. But the program is Emerging Talent Software Engineers. I will say it's becoming increasingly competitive as other companies are slowing hiring. Our brand has grown. More people are looking to get into coding. So it's becoming more competitive, we're really excited to bring on stronger and stronger engineers. But you can definitely either find myself on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. I'll try to get back to folks. But also on our careers page, you can find out more information as well. Or like I said, hit up my software engineers, ask for their genuine perspective to learn about their experience.
And Melissa, what do you use to source candidates, find candidates? What tools or avenues are you going down?
Sure. So even though Amadeus is based in Barcelona and I do have 2 team members there, the rest of my team is here in Texas, and more specifically the Metroplex here. And I have hired at least 2 people directly through networking events like this, through the website that was formerly known as Free Code Camp Dallas, but is now rebranded as Dallas Software Developers. So I think it's definitely, for me, what I'm looking for there is if you are motivated enough to start self-teaching yourself how to code, that is a really big plus in my book, being a self-starter and being able to learn on your own, but also work with people and help each other, right? I second what Danny said about making friends in this space is a really key piece of what helped me get to where I am too. And help each other, right, with your job searches. And but to your point about what are we looking for there? Again, I would say, just being a self-starter and self-directed learner is really helpful and a big asset that I cannot really find any other way than if I start there.
I just have to echo that really quickly. Self-starter, we look for my opportunity specifically, you have to come in already knowing how to code. We won't teach you, but when you come into a role, you're going to have to learn new technologies, new skills in your career. It's going to be a never-ending journey. The number one coding language that is popular today is not what it was a year ago or 5 years ago. So we're really looking for people who A, have the skill set, but B, are going to come in and have that drive to learn and seek out those resources themselves and not sit around and wait for someone to come and teach them.
Perry?
Yeah, so having drive, that can't be overstated, to be honest. So I come from, originally I started, early in career, and I had a guy, his name was Corey Floyd, who broke into tech. His background was not in technology, it was in like social media marketing. but he literally went out, got certifications on his own. He made meaningful connections with people within our company, and he ended up getting his foot in the door within our academy program. So that's like a program. It was a systems a sales engineer academy program for entry level, and they pretty much like teach you how to become a field sales engineer, and that's how he got his foot in the door. And they didn't hire him because he had the highest technical acumen. They just said, I can teach technology, but I can't teach drive. So I wanted to give that story. But in terms of hiring, I know on the technical sales side, it's a little different. So like the roles that I have, they're more senior level, but for like entry level roles, it's best to go the like boot camp route or getting industry certifications. So like I always recommend the networking plus the security plus because I work in cybersecurity. So understanding like networking and how like you know networking like networks move across like the internet, that's really important, and understanding like security and how the networks are protected. This is really important in terms of being in our field. And once you get like your certifications, if you can do a boot camp, like if you can afford to do a boot camp, that's great. But also going to networking events like this, also it's another event in Dallas, Mixer Cloud, like where you can go. It's like a lot of different like events and meetups that you can do just to meet people that can like help you get your foot in the door. Because all you need to do is get your foot in the door so that you can get like that real world experience and become attractive to employers. But um definitely getting certifications, to be honest, is super important. And because I know as a recruiter, when I'm searching for my roles, I mostly search through LinkedIn on the professional side. So when I'm searching, I'm like searching for specific like skills. Like we use like Boolean searches in LinkedIn recruiters, and we're looking for specific skills that candidates like have on their resume. So if you have like the skills that I'm looking for, I'll reach out to you and to have a conversation. And most recruiters are that way. Or even when you're applying to a job, like even the applicant tracking systems that we use, they pick up on like different skills and they see kind of what percentage of a match you are for the role. So that's really big when you're trying to like the break into tech, to be honest. So I always it's super important to have a skill section and have a section with the certifications that you have because we all pick up on those keywords. But on the early and career side, I know we did partner with different programs like Full Stack Academy or Empower, and that was they offered different certifications to individuals coming from the non-traditional backgrounds, and within those, like they partner you with different companies and different like hiring teams, so that you can have like the face to face with recruiters, a hiring manager, and you can introduce yourself and make those connections with them and take it from there. So you really gotta just cast your net as wide as possible. Make sure you get like the hands-on, like not hands-on, but get the certifications that you need so that you can go and sell yourself, in the future. So
I'm going to add some value in a moment, but you've touched on all three of you've touched on follow-up questions that I have. And so I want to touch on the first one because all three of you have said something similar for one particular thing. You said if they're a self-starter or they have drive, that's a demonstrable quality. How are they supposed to demonstrate that on a resume or a LinkedIn profile or a portfolio site or something along those lines? How are you looking for those qualities? We can start Angie.
Yeah. So for myself, I work with a lot of candidates who are coming out of boot camps. And something that I really like to see that shows that initiative to learn more is if you've taken a course beyond that boot camp. If I know that you're coming from a Java boot camp, but then you've learned Python on the side or some cloud technologies, I see that. I know that boot camps are super time intensive. And so for me as a recruiter to see that, wow, you've put your life on hold, you've had probably a lot of sleepless nights, and then you've gone on Udemy, Coursera, those kinds of websites to pursue additional certifications, additional learning. If you're a part of community meetups like this one, absolutely list it on your resume because we see that you want to get plugged in. I think they're going to a meetup, they're going to want to join a business resource group when they join the company, and that's going to improve employee retention. So those are just some things that I look for that you can show on a resume.
I also think I agree that certifications are important, and that is one way to show evidence of your learning. But I listed in the notes that I linked in our meetup comments. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at those, but 3 things I look for in particular are, have you volunteered in any capacity, like with code.org or any way that you can show that you are going above and beyond, as Angie mentioned, and not just is not enough to just sit behind your computer and earn certification after certification. It really is not enough. So get out there and volunteer and show that you're making a difference. You can also do hackathons. I was fortunate to participate in First Hack Dallas. That was pre-COVID. I don't think it's still around, but we would love to resurrect hackathons and get that going. And that shows, again, that you're working with people on a team, you are getting hands-on experience, that sort of thing. And then the other one, Hacktoberfest was mentioned, contributing to open source projects is really can be intimidating at first, but that's definitely, again, another above and beyond that I look for.
Before I go to Perry, just saying 2 of the 3 things that she just said is something that we're in the works on for this group as well. So especially if you're local, I highly recommend, if you're not in the Discord, join it, because that's where we're going to be posting a lot of those updates. Perry.
I think for me is, do you have a curiosity for technology? So a lot of people, you may say, yeah, I'm curious about technology, but some people actually show by action. Like some people actually build different systems, whether it's like they may build, it's some people that may try to build a computer from scratch, and they may like speak about that, or they try to create some type of like gaming software like Raspberry Pi, or like they try to create a firewall in their house, or like they have routers in their house that they pick apart to try to understand like how like the networking works. So it's like that's how you take that curiosity and pretty much, I guess, you put some action behind it. Like when you're speaking to candidates and they can really talk about, yeah, I've actually done this, like I've created this, or I picked apart like my router at home, like that really shows that, they have like that drive and they're really hungry, and they're gonna take the next step, to make sure that they get their foot in the door. So
If you've been following me online for any kind of time, I've been saying this for 4 years, y'all. Some of y'all took this advice, some of y'all haven't. But I'm telling y'all, prime example, right? They mentioned hackathons. Hackathons, huge way to not just network, but meet other developers, get those connections, have conversations. Going to meetups. You're literally at a meetup right now. Why haven't you already taken a selfie with the group behind you to showcase that you're at a meetup? Recruiters, cover your ear. They eat this stuff up. They really do. It goes a long way. Oh, this person's so passionate. They're going to meetups and events outside of their work schedule, outside of their school schedule. They're meeting other devs. Photos like that go a long way. Volunteering. I'm big on volunteering. I've talked about that for a long time. But you know what's one of the best things about volunteering? The experience doesn't expire. There's no expiration date on the way that you gave back. It can stay on your resume. It could stay on your LinkedIn. It's valuable. Think about it. When you volunteer, you're giving back. That's already a win. You're getting something for it with that experience. That's also a win. And you're meeting other people and you're helping out your local community. What else in your life could be a win-win-win with no downside besides the hour or few hours that you put into it? It goes a long way. So I highly recommend it. And the other thing too is, like, when it comes to photos at meetups, you should be taking them. But you know what you should also be doing? Actually having meaningful conversations with people, adding them to your LinkedIn's. Good stuff like that, right? One big tip I'll give you, by the way, this is like one of my biggest tips that I always tell college students or anybody else for that matter. When you get someone's connection on LinkedIn, actually literally go through their profile. I know it takes some work, but go through their profile and actually see if there's something meaningful on there. See if there's something that you connect with. And when you send that connection, put a note with it. It may be counterintuitive to some, but when you add that note, if I just accept a blank connection request, it just falls into my connections. I may forget about it. That note ends up in my inbox. And so even if I forget about you for like a week or 2 weeks later, if you're not like a social media influencer kind of person, just an average individual, you're not getting hundreds upon hundreds of messages a day, right? So it's going to stay near the top of that inbox for a relatively decent amount of time. So there's a higher likelihood that that reply ends up meeting somebody. And so that conversation could be a great way. Now, you can't do the generic copy paste message. Everybody knows it. Everyone, you can sense it a mile away. If you can sense spam messages, you think they can't? Can you imagine how many they get on a regular basis? Think about that. Do you want to be known as the person that, oh, we just talked, but yeah, here's the copy paste. I don't, what am I going to engage with? Do something meaningful with that interaction, because you literally never know where one conversation can take you. There's almost 8 billion people on this planet. You just need one of them to fall in love with you and give you the opportunity that you're looking for. So stop mass applying and spraying and praying, hoping for the best. Start acting with intention and start waking up like you mean it, and stop waking up like it's a brand new accident. Like some people walk into stuff and then they don't know why. But if you start walking and acting with intention, things start turning out the way that you want it to turn out. All right. So that's a big reason there. So coming into the secondary set of questions that I now have, you mentioned how LinkedIn is a valuable tool that you end up utilizing to search for candidates, right? When you land on a LinkedIn profile, and I'm everybody here uses LinkedIn. They wouldn't be on the stage because that's how I contacted them all. But when you're landing on a profile, what are some of the things that you're initially looking for to have those conversations?
So outside of the skills, just to make sure you have the skill set, like we do look for complete profiles. So, have the about me section filled out. That's a way to showcase yourself. I know I have mine filled out so I can showcase myself to candidates, because some candidates may not want to respond back to me if maybe like they don't know enough about me or my passions don't align with theirs in some way. But like have the about me section filled out, like have a professional photo, because this is at the end of the day, like LinkedIn is your professional brand. So you want to have a professional photo, um, you know, as your LinkedIn photo, because you're showcasing yourself, and have like your experience section completed. If this is just my personal opinion, if you have a company that you only stayed at for 4 months, I wouldn't add it. Like I just wouldn't, because a lot of employers, they don't like job hoppers. They like people that have stayed in roles. I like to say 2 years. So like if you had a role that didn't work out and you only stayed for 4 months, I just wouldn't even put it, to be honest. And like of course, have the skills section filled out as well with like all the skills that you've acquired. Definitely have that complete. So because like the keywords are gonna come out when we're searching. So I just like to see a complete profile. And volunteer experience, we don't particularly look at that. We really just look at like how long a candidate stayed with their companies, like the skill set that they have. Um, I guess some about me, like making sure they have a complete profile before I reach out. But that's what I would recommend.
I'm going to address one of those points at the end of this, though. But Melissa, go ahead.
Sure. So I agree that with the profile picture, you would be surprised how many people, and I get it, your favorite NFT, PFP is not the place, LinkedIn is not the place to be putting your ape or whoever you have. I'll just, as much as I love that space, that's not the right place. So, and also, I was just actually learning about this today. There are certain cultural traditions and languages that don't have capital letters or that concept of capitalization. If that's not your cultural tradition, or there's not some valid reason why you aren't following through on things like capitalization and punctuation and attention to detail and grammar, those are the sorts of things that like, hey, that semicolon that's missing in your code, that's gonna be showing up there too. And I'm sorry, but that is the reality of the world that we live in. Is number one for me, a big one is attention to detail. So I can tell that from a profile. The other thing I'm looking for is level of effort, and it's not enough to just list your job, but what did you achieve while you were there? What did you learn while you were there? Did you solve a problem? Did you, create a new metric that helped, you guys be more successful as a team or something like that? So it's, again, touching on that above and beyond and the drive and the motivation. Those things are, I guess I would quantify that as level of effort. And it wasn't just kind of slopped together and, not completely professionally filled out.
Angie?
Sorry. List your tech stack. So don't just say full stack developer, but let me know what languages, both front end, back end, what databases, any other technologies that you're proficient in. List that. Just to echo Perry, we do keyword search for those tech skills and those hard skills. Also, just fill out your profile as thoroughly as possible. I hire a lot of career changers, so you might have experience. For example, maybe you were a manager at Starbucks, and you might think it's not relevant to technology, but again, to Perry's point, if we see longevity, if we see growth in your prior role, those are a lot of transferable skills that just helps us to understand the holistic picture of you as a candidate. So don't be afraid to list previous experience. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, it is super fleshed out. I have college volunteering experience at the Boys and Girls Club, because if you look at my profile and you were ever served or volunteered at Boys and Girls Club, that's a point of connection. And you can reach out to me and say, hey, I see you volunteered there. So did I. And we can kind of connect over that. I've had people even reach out to me and say, hey, I saw on your LinkedIn profile your Duolingo certification. And it might sound corny, it's not relevant to my job, but it's just that element of them taking the time to personalize that message.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with letting your personality show through. That's a big one too for me. And I love to see it like, oh, you're an animal lover, and I know that because of, you've on a volunteer basis redesigned the local shelter's website to make it more responsive and have better functionality. Awesome. That tells me about you as a person, sets you apart.
So I do want to expand upon more, but I have a question. And my question is, and this goes for all, it's not a long question or a long answer, but on average, when you initially land on a profile, there has been stats that have been thrown around a lot where, according to a study that was done in like 2020, the average recruiter spends 6 to 10 seconds on a profile before deciding if they're going to invest more time in it. The second stage theoretically is 30 seconds. The third stage is 3 minutes. Do you find that to be somewhat accurate, somewhat off? Do you think that's a fair assumption? Fair?
Definitely.
Fair. Okay, perfect. I thought it was, and I'm glad to have that emphasis there to kind of prove that point. This is a big reason why also that, number one, I have always stressed the importance of the keywords, because, and I've shown this, if you need help with LinkedIn, we have the LinkedIn series. It's completely free. It can kind of help you out. But we've even shown that when people are looking for React developers, they're not typing in, they're not typing in like MERN. They're typing in React, Express, Node, etc., etc. They're typing in the actual terms. So when you put MERN developer, you've literally canceled yourself out of 4 possible search terms. You need to expressly write that stuff out and make sure the technology itself is there, because that's the keyword. So when you put MERN dev, LAMP dev, you're not landing in searches for that. Write that tech out, because that's exactly what they're searching for. Write out the tools that you're utilizing. But one big thing when it comes to the experience section, since everybody mentioned that one in particular, stop telling folks the basic duties of your job. They know that. In the example of Starbucks, they know you made coffee. You don't need to tell them that, right? But if you were at that job for 3 years, you showed somebody somewhere something. What was it? You got a promotion? You got a raise? What did you do to earn that? Because when you describe those contributions, you're giving yourself something to actually talk about more upon, right? And one thing that I've given this example many times. When you apply for a job, they're not like, oh, Kenny applied for this job, bring the private investigator in so we can send them over to find out everything about this person. That's not the case. They have your LinkedIn, your resume, portfolio site, whatever else external items that you give them, and that's it. Based upon how you position yourself on there, that's how they're developing some of these questions. And when you don't give them enough about, especially if you're a career changer, you don't give them enough information about prior jobs, what do you expect them to ask you? That's when they start going down a path of, the term I like to use is cookie cutter questions, because they don't have nothing to go off of. And the vast majority of people need to understand this when it comes to interviewing. It's a fact-finding mission. They're trying to get as much information as possible to paint a full picture. If you give that information early on, it makes their job easier. But on top of that, it makes the interview go more in your direction than anywhere else. Because guess what? Now they're asking you about your experience at the hackathon. Now they're asking about that project that you worked on. Now they're asking about that contribution you made at that job. Now they're asking about that time that you volunteered at XYZ, stuff like that. The other thing is, when I'm talking about positioning, it's for that reason. How does it position you in the interview? So in the case of Perry here, where he said, we don't really look at volunteer experience, right? That's when sourcing the candidate. Now, how do you get to work that into the conversation in the interview? I've always said your LinkedIn and resume exists to pique interest to the point where they're like, I need to jump on a call with this person. Your autobiography is in that interview, not beforehand. Give them the highlight reel initially, get in the conversation, then work everything else into it. Talk about that volunteer experience. Talk about the time you helped this local shelter and you were able to maintain their website and kind of do stuff for them. That's when you start working that in. The other thing is, don't just do what I like to call keyword soup, where you just throw in 50 keywords, because they're gonna know. They're like, are they just copying and pasting every single possible thing that I could be searching for? Instead, talk about how you used React and Figma and everything else on the front end to design a customer focused approach to a website. And then how you use Java on the back end with Spring Framework to kind of do the calculations. Now they're seeing the use case of it. It goes a lot further in those conversations. And then that's when they're coming saying, hey, can you tell me about how you utilize this? You said you utilize a customer first approach. What does that even mean? Now you're getting to keep them where you feel the most comfortable. Because the reality is, I personally don't think that you have to necessarily be born confident to do well in an interview. I do believe confidence comes from being comfortable. And if you can kind of guide them to where you want the conversations to go and where you can add the most of value and talk about yourself in the best ways possible, those conversations are going to end up going your way. And if you have some great technical experience, and for those, because I'm going to ask this question too in a moment, that don't have job experience in the tech sector, what are ways that you can kind of do to combat that? One great way is having a great project that you can talk about. And the reason why I say this is, it's the only area that you have a demonstrable skill that you can talk about. But the problem is, you can't do the weather app that you see on YouTube. You can't do the YouTube project and expect everyone to go head over heels here. I'm a firm believer that your project that you build has to solve a problem, because you're not someone who's just regurgitating syntax. Syntax is the delivery mechanism that you're utilizing to deliver solutions. You're a problem solver. That's why people pay so well for developers. That's what you're going to be doing within the job. And so if you have a project that has a problem, you have a solution for it, and you can talk about why you believe that solution to be accurate, that's a conversation that a lot of people are going to want to pay attention to and be a part of. So I highly recommend that approach being something that you're thinking about. I don't know why my alarm is going off right now. But that's a big focus on that. So kind of going back now, does anybody have something on that?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. So when you're in an interview, for recruiters and hiring managers, the best way to make sure they get as much detail as possible from your answer is utilizing the STAR method: situation, task, action, result. Usually when you're answering questions utilizing that method, they won't have to ask you too many probing questions, because when you're in an interview and they keep having to ask probing questions, it's because you didn't give them enough detail they were looking for. But you always want to use the STAR method, because when you're in an interview, they're probably going to ask you no more than like 5 questions usually, because the questions, you want to make sure you give enough detail to where like you're answering their questions for a couple minutes. I mean, to be honest, and you want to kind of flow. You want it to kind of flow like a conversation and not just an interview. When it goes like a conversation and not just an interview, that's when you did well. So I just want that.
Just to emphasize one point here, I've always said that interviews start out as an interrogation, and it's your job to make it an organic conversation. And there was a study that was done. I even did like a whole report on this online. I think don't quote me on the number, because now it escaped my mind. I had the number in my head. It was like 80+% of employers said candidates that aren't asking questions back in the interview, to them it seemed as if they weren't interested in the job, which is wild, because I wouldn't be sitting in the chair anyway. Like, we wouldn't be talking if I wasn't interested in the job. But to them, that's their perception. So you need to be focused on, how do I get this conversation going 2 ways, number one. But number two, what are some of the things that you should have done before we even sat in that chair? Have you researched the company? Have you actually gone on their company website and seen their about page on these other pages? Have you even looked at their social media pages? Because that's the stuff they want the public to know anyway. And if you could work that into the conversation, that's an easy win right there to kind of showcase, hey, I've done my research. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're doing. And it's also aligns with something that I'm interested in as well. That's a win-win, right? I'm big on volunteering. One of the first companies I ended up working for, they gave several $1 million to the Boys and Girls Club of Memphis. I love the fact that you did that. I'm big on volunteering, giving back to the community, so it really aligns well with me. Boom, that was a huge win. And what's funny is in my fourth interview, because I mentioned this in the first one, in my fourth interview with that company, they called back to that saying, we heard that you've really been into volunteering and la da da. That's an easy callback. So why not spend that time going through that? The other thing that I'm big on, by the way, and I just came to my mind, so I'm just going to say this, even though slightly off topic a little bit. One thing that I always do before I even go into interview number one, I oftentimes utilize LinkedIn and I'll message some of the current employees now, like, do you, especially if I know I got the interview, like, hey, do you even like working here? Like, what is it like? What's the experience? But it's the second thing I do, and this ends up blowing people's minds for some reason. So just, hold your chair on a little bit. I message ex-employees because they no longer have any financial bias to the company. They don't work there anymore. Why did you leave? Was it a shit show? Was it a great experience? Would you just moving on to new things? They're going to give you the truth. And for me, when I'm interviewing, even if it's my first job in tech, I want to know, is this going to be a nightmare? Is this going to be a great experience? Am I going to be able to grow through and go through a lot of these challenges that they're going to give me? Or is this going to be a place that churns me out, throws me to the side, and kind of upsets my career in the very early stages? So always message ex-employees. I still do that to this day. I want to know from them, why don't they work there anymore? And so it's helped me out a lot in my career. Highly, highly recommend it. Plus, ex-employees will give you the inside scoop on like, who should you be talking out to? Who should you be reaching out to and networking beforehand? So that kind of goes a long way as well. Anything y'all want to add to that?
Spiraling back around a little bit too. Once you're in that first interview with me, believe it or not, I guess I'm not sure how y'all feel about this, but I want you to succeed in this. And I know it can be intimidating to be in the interview, yeah, but I need people in that role. I don't know if you've ever been on the side of being the interviewer in any of your previous career lives, but I need yesterday help on my team. Everybody else is scrambling and we're shorthanded. I want you to succeed. I liked what I saw or wouldn't have made it this far. So try not to view me as some big scary person who's going to try to gotcha you in the interview. I get nothing out of that, right? So at least the way my team approaches it, we try not to overwhelm on, by the way, we still interview mostly online through like Zoom calls and that kind of thing, even though we have an office in Irving. Just throwing that out there, that you might want to get comfortable if you're not already with being on camera and run through all of that, Google Meet or Zoom or whatever platform, so that you're not even more nervous on your interview because you're not familiar with all the setup of that.
Anything you want to add? No? Yes? All right. Okay. So here's my question. We've kind of covered a little bit on what to kind of do somewhat to start getting noticed. And we've kind of covered on like some of the basics of what we'd expect in an interview. But what are certain things that you're looking for within that interview to say like, this was a good interview, this is a good candidate, I kind of like what they're bringing to the conversation to the table? You want to start, Angie?
Yeah, so I would say be personable. If you are interviewing with the hiring manager, you're going to end up working with them every day. So some element of that cultural, and when I say culture, I mean the work culture that you guys will be fostering within the team every day. You're going to want to have that. So connect with them, be detailed. Again, echoing the STAR response is super helpful. If you answer a question with, I would do this, and you're very vague, that's not so helpful. But if you're able to pull from specific examples of, I actually confronted that challenge, this is how I solved it with super detailed steps, the more we can get a picture of how you solve problems and overcome obstacles in the workplace. What else was I going to say? How to stand out. And also echoing just having done your research on the company, just to show your interest. I recruit for a financial services company, so not many people think that it is a technology company, but if you've done your research, you know that we are very much a tech company and absolutely driving our industry forward in our space. So we have a ton of cybersecurity, AI initiatives. We were the first bank to have a space in the Web3 metaverse, I think, something like that. So if you come to an interview, you know the name of our CEO, our CFO, that shows that you've taken that little bit extra time that a lot of candidates actually don't.
All of that is very good information. And I think additionally, again, to stand out for me, showing that you are coachable and have a good attitude and you're friendly, because in our particular company, there are whole platforms that we support that there's no way you could already know them. I'm going to have to teach you how to work in them. So if you seem teachable and coachable, that's a big plus for me. If you feel like if you come across as you already know everything there is to know, we're probably going to have a bad time. And then also, I like to, again, your personality coming across. I was mentioning earlier that I don't actually need 11 quarterbacks on my team, right? I need that you are bringing something different to my team that's a strength. And I look for, when I ask you, what are you good at or what are your strengths? I take very seriously your answer because I need to fit that puzzle piece into my team. So just have a, I guess, a good answer for that. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Because that'll probably come up.
I guess for me, are you a culture fit? I think that's one of the most important things, because you got to understand when you're working with an employer, or whoever you're interviewing with, you're going to be working with them 8 hours out of the day, to be honest. So the chemistry has to be there. Like, people hire people who they like. So that is good points. You have to do your research on the person you'll be interviewing with and doing your research on the company, because it shows that you actually, like, you want the job, you want the role. Also, coming with questions. You don't have to ask questions during, like, the meat of the interview process, but towards the end, I will always have pretty strong questions to ask the interviewer, because that really they're really, interviewers are usually impressed by this. And even if you're like more of an introverted type of personality, you still, you still want to make sure that you are enthusiastic and during the interview. um, just because, people, like I said, that people hire people who they actually like. So but yeah, that's what I suggest.
One thing that was a resounding theme was, using Perry's word here, people hire people that they like. The era of being the type of dev that just can't get along with others, or I can't use the other term I want to use, but like someone who's just not a great team member, who's very toxic. Those days really don't exist anymore. And you need to be able to work well with others. You need to be able to have communication skills. Prime example, I remember I was working, previous job. I won't say the employer, maybe not to get anybody in trouble, but they literally had a candidate come in who ex-Fang, amazing technical skills, crushed the technical interview, one of the worst people to talk to. And it was so bad that they said, I know if I put them on any team, team morale is going to go down and we may end up losing people because of this. So they passed on the candidate, regardless of the technical skill, because that's what a lot of companies are thinking about now. How do we keep our employees for longer periods of time? How do we reduce churn rate? How do we make them the place kind of a better experience for the employees? Mainly because less times that they have to cycle through employees, it's easier and it's less expensive, because sourcing candidates costs money. So it's a value. So if you have bad people skills, that's something to work on. One thing I also want to make very clear, and I've said this for years: interview skills do not equate to technical skills. So it's a different skill set that you need to be constantly paying attention to. And to harp on one extra thing that Perry said, you should be asking questions in there. I'm a very big believer in asking questions within an interview. I will give you one of my favorite questions to ask in an interview. Interviewers, cover your ears. But, and if somebody asks this question, don't judge them. But this question actually has been a huge help for me. It gives me a lot of insight. It's a question that I don't often see asked by others. And the question is, I would ask the interviewer at each stage of the interview process, because, and it sucks, tech interviews like 3 to 5 rounds, depending on the company that you go to. But every single interview, I would ask, to you, what does success look like for this position 6 months from now? I'm very specific on the month time frame for several reasons. Number one, it lets me know from their perspective what they expect a developer to be doing within that 6-month period. Does this align with what I would expect the job to be wanting from me? If it is, fantastic, we're aligned. If it's not, and it sounds like, this is gonna be a nightmare of a place for me, maybe it's not the place that's a fit for me, right? Because it's a two-way street. I want to make sure that wherever I'm going, I'm committing to for the next 2 to 5 years, it's gonna be a place that I actually want to be at, right? So is the workload reasonable? If it is, fantastic. I'm taking mental notes, because now I have the exact roadmap of what I need to execute by month 6. And when I do execute and knock all this out, guess who's automatically getting spoken about for promotions and raises without having to do any of the work. I hit everything that you were looking for, whether you realize it or not. And the other thing that I do, this is a tip for after you get the job. But every time I mention this, even to people at the tech lead level, they kind of, their mind shakes a little bit. I'm very big on having living documents in my one-on-ones, right? So I demand one-on-ones with all my employers, right? So every 2 weeks, I want a one-on-one. At the end of that one-on-one, if there's action items, I'm writing down everything in that document anyway, right? That we're talking about. But if there's action items, I'm actually making check boxes with those action items. So that way, when we go to this next one-on-one 2 weeks from now, I start the beginning of the call with my manager saying, hey, remember that at one-on-one, let's go over those items. Boom. Can you check that off for me? Can you check it off? And so he's physically checking off every single item on that list. So guess what? When it's review time, I really don't have to do much work on my end because they already know every 2 weeks we've been hitting goals, we've been knocking it out, we've been doing stuff. They know firsthand. But also because of that living document with that record of all the accomplishments that I did within that time period, when people are scrambling for 2 to 3 weeks trying to get their review paperwork together, it takes me 10 minutes. So it's very good to have that open communication both ways. A lot of people waste their one-on-ones, which I think is a very foolish move. It's super, super valuable. But the other thing too is when it comes to writing on your LinkedIn and your resume, you've got a whole list of things that you can tap into that you don't have to like really think about. Because for whatever reason, it's really not your fault. Developers suck at resumes. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I at all levels, by the way, it's not just like, oh, junior.
Very true.
Nah, it's so bad. Prime example, I did a one-on-one call with somebody out of, I think they were out of New York 3 days ago. Of their resume, there was only about 5% that I could keep. And I said, we have to rework 95% of it. And it's stuff that seems like it makes sense in the moment. But even when it came to the job experience, there's no contributions there. Like they had a job experience as help desk. What was the thing there? Answered phone calls. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking about?
Can I say something?
Go for it.
So we're in this whole AI wave, artificial intelligence. You utilize ChatGPT to help you with your resume. You know, now you want to, because what you can do is you can jot down and you can input a command in ChatGPT, and it's free. It's a free tool you can use. Just go to Google, type in like ChatGPT, download it to your computer, and you can say, "Hey, I want to put, I want to create a resume. Here's what I did at this role." Then put like just organically put what you did in the role and like what you helped to accomplish, and tell them to put this into 4 bullet points so that you can add it to your resume. And it makes life a lot easier, to be honest. You can even do that with your skill section. You can help them like you can utilize ChatGPT to help you create like your whole resume and LinkedIn profile. If it sounds too robotic, put it in your own words. But at least you have a blueprint to look at. Don't make it too robotic though, because we can see straight through that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say
Yeah.
start with ChatGPT,
Yeah.
but then add in your element. One thing I've been seeing lately is what I call almost an over ChatGPTification of LinkedIn posts. I know you got that off of ChatGPT, and it's really obvious. But that's because ChatGPT produces a lot of jargony, corporate sounding, generic language when we want to see quantifiable results and percentages, measurable things that you've contributed. So yeah, definitely start with ChatGPT. It's a wonderful place to start, but then add in those metrics that you've hit and contributed and make it, true to yourself and your experience.
Yeah. So to that, I always say, and this is not just for the resume, but anything ChatGPT related, allow it to spark interest or spark the idea, do the research. Because ChatGPT is like, honestly, it's like a toxic ex that will gaslight you into believing stuff. Like it's really good at that. Like it's so confident when it's wrong, it's amazing. And so you need to be aware of that. You need to think about that. The other thing that I would say about this is ChatGPT is really good at certain things. Don't over ChatGPT things, because I was just having a conversation maybe 3 weeks ago with someone who was hiring a bunch of developers, and they said it's amazing how some people rely on ChatGPT for everything, to where when they're filling out an application, they're literally copying and pasting the questions into there, and ChatGPT is making stuff up. And the reality is, if you give it some good information, ChatGPT can reword stuff, but ChatGPT will basically just take your command, whether it's factual or not, it'll work the points in or create points that may be completely off. But the other thing is it creates, and it's not ChatGPT's fault, it's based on the prompts. But for some questions, it'll just create some crazy responses. So one of the questions that they ask, the hiring manager asks in the application is, outside of coding, tell me one thing that you like doing, like just to find out something personable about the person. They literally sent me the screenshot of this reply that said, I love physics and the history of physics started in, it's like, what are we doing? Like, but they went down that ChatGPT rabbit hole and it created a whole essay. It's like, for what? Like, you're losing an opportunity there because they know exactly now. Like, if they didn't already know by that point, they know, okay, you're just using AI tools to fill this all out. You're not taking this seriously. I want to focus on a candidate that will take it seriously. So focus on how you're wording this stuff and utilizing. So let it spark an idea, apply the research because you can get some good ideas from it.
I just wanted to say I love AI. I'm all about it. Use it daily in my job, but there are definitely use cases that it's suited for and others that it's not. And vague, it does not do well with vague. So I like to think of it as a very useful tool in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing and can fact check it. And to everybody's just echo that. I think we're unanimous here. You cannot rely on AI 100% yet. You just can't.
But no, just to, like, Perry's not wrong here either. Like,
Yeah.
if you're having an issue, use ChatGPT. But just remember, like all things, it's a tool, right? It's not a click and go and you're just done. Just try and be smart with this stuff. So now I have a question. We've kind of talked on a lot of things. What are some things that you think are like blatantly bad moves to do on a resume? I'll start with Perry this time.
Bad moves to do on
Like
a resume.
something that you think is like, this is a bad thing. I see it often, or it's a bad trade, or maybe you're doing yourself a disservice by having that there. You want to go to Angie first? Yeah, we'll go to Angie first.
So something I see with resumes. So sometimes if I see a resume that's lacking detail or is just making me question, it's something is unclear. A lot of times I'll call them and I'll say, "Hey, I saw this on your resume and it's honestly confusing. Can you explain that to me?" And they'll kind of fluster a little bit, and they'll say, "Well, someone gave me this advice." And one specific example was once a person listed out their projects, but they didn't list the tech stack that they used in those projects. And so I said, "Why did you omit that?" And they said, "Well, someone gave me that advice." And I said, "Who?" And they said, "Another developer with zero experience that's trying to break into tech." And I said, "Well, what experience do they have to be giving you that advice?" And they're like, "Oh." So it's things like that. Like, listen to Danny. Honestly, spits a ton of wisdom on his LinkedIn. I have told him I think he's a recruiter in disguise. But listen to recruiters, listen to hiring managers. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of like poor feedback or poor advice kind of spread amongst junior developers. So just be careful who you're getting that advice from. And just for the record, you should absolutely list the tech stack that you've used in a specific project and give as much detail on that project and the problem you solved, as Danny had mentioned.
I would say, as a designer and somebody who loves fonts, colors, branding, and all of the things, it's okay to have a beautiful version of your resume. And then you also need like a very kind of plain text. It will go well being uploaded into a PDF, sort of like all the automation tools that have to happen in order for me to actually get your resume on the receiving end in good formatting and layout. So just keep that in mind that even for design roles, that we love all things to be beautiful, you might need to have or definitely have another version of your resume that's more plain.
For me, since I'm coming from more the technical sales side, so I believe, having a paragraph for each bullet point, to be honest, you're not really getting straight to the point and you're not explaining what you accomplished. Because as Danny mentioned, recruiters, we spend probably no more than 15 seconds, 10 seconds scanning a resume. If we see interest in it, then it'll jump up to like 20 to 30. So you always want to get straight to the point. Depending on where you are in your career, it's no need to have like more than 2 pages, depending on where you are. Like if you're not like director, executive level, me personally, I don't think that it's a need to go above 2 pages, but 2 pages is okay. But I don't think it's a need to go above that. What else can I think of? Also, this could be a cultural thing, but you don't have to have a picture and like where you're from. Well, you want to put where you live, but you don't have to have like your cell phone number. You can have your email, where you live, your name, but you don't have to put like a picture on your resume. I know some cultures do that, which is okay, but for most roles, here in America, like you don't have to have that, to be honest. So
So I'll echo that one. And I actually learned that there are many countries, especially in Europe, Africa, Asia, where it's a mandatory item to have that picture. But especially since we're talking about Dallas, you don't have to have that here. So if that's a trait that you're bringing, you can leave that off. And I'm a big believer in not having that. Obviously, one huge reason, the bias. Whether we want to admit it or not, bias exists in hiring in pretty much all sectors of the world. Why open that door? Let them see your qualifications, have that conversation. No need to be disqualified because maybe they don't like the way that photo looks, or maybe they were looking for somebody that looks something like XYZ. And we don't need to have that conversation. You don't need to have that being a hindrance into you having success. The other thing is, I'm a very, very big believer that your resume should have the three S's: short, sweet, specific. Um, to Perry's point, you shouldn't be going on and on. I see that a lot. The other thing is, I'm very against, and I'll have an argument about this with anybody. I don't care. I hate bars or like the bubbles that represent your ability and a skill. And the reason why is, where'd you get those numbers from? There's no test that's like, here's 100% of JavaScript. Let me find out how much you know. The other thing is, if you put down, let's say, 5 on Java, right? Well, what if I'm like, oh, I need somebody who knows a little bit more? But what if you knew 100% of what was required for the role? You discounted yourself so much that I matched that energy to say, I need somebody better. You took yourself out of the running. Why? To have some bubbles? For what? It doesn't represent anything. You're getting that metric from a feeling. Do you know, when I was learning how to code, I thought the world began and ended at JavaScript. And I'm like, I got this. I know what an array is. Where that job at? And then I started realizing, whoa, there's way more to this. There's frameworks. I still remember a very short story. I'll tell you this. I love telling this, especially like colleges. I remember I was going to meetups. I'd been learning the code like 2.5 months. I was getting close to the 3 month mark, and everybody, especially online, they're like, 90 days to change your life, 90 days, 90 days, 90 days. You know that show 90 Day Fiance? They can't even get a damn fiance in 90 days, but I'm gonna get a brand new job in 90 days. I was excited, geeked out, and ready. And I barely knew what JavaScript was, right? Like I barely knew what an array was, but somehow I convinced somebody to give me an interview. And I was working at the gas stations at this time. And this is like, pre-pandemic. So Zoom wasn't really a thing yet and la da da da. Well, it probably wasn't a business setting, but no house had that. And so I'm geeked out and I rush home from the gas station and I dress in a suit, right? Like I'm like, they can't see me, but it's like the whole thing, like dress for the part you want, not the part you have. And I'm like, I'm not gonna wear, my gas station uniform on this call. Like I'm gonna be professional, right? And I'm excited, I'm geeked out, I'm nervous. And we get on the call and we go through the initial pleasantries, right? And they're like, all right, Danny, let's get down to business. Like, so, let's talk about the tech stack. Like, do you know JavaScript? And I'm like, yeah, I know JavaScript. I know HTML says JavaScript. I'm actually making a project right now with JavaScript, and I'm going to be doing this and this. And I'm like, cool, I knocked it out. They're like, okay, cool, but this role, like, do you know React? And I'm like, yeah, I know React. Happy, sad, mad. What are we talking about? I was so new to programming, y'all. I had never heard of the term framework yet. So, like, when they said that, I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about right now. Like, this is brand new. I immediately heard an hour conversation turn into 4.5 minutes. And like I heard the disappointment and almost anger. They're like, you're wasting our time. I was crushed in the moment, but it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me because I realized what I was lacking to be marketable in the industry. And the reality is, I was discounting myself in a lot of areas because I was like, this is all I need. So I limited and I capped my own levels of success and opportunities because of that mindset. It's very, very important to not do that. And I think adding those bubbles and adding those little graphs, you're doing that exact thing to yourself. And you may end up losing yourself in opportunities, whether you realize it or not. If I'm gonna lose an opportunity, let me lose it on my terms. Don't let it be because of some random thing that I saw on some graphic website that said go ahead and do this. Um, the other thing is, I've never met any hiring manager that said the color of this resume is why I hired this person. I've never had that conversation. So to kind of echo Melissa's point, it's great to have like a designed one, but make sure your resume is making it through and being parsed correctly by the softwares that are reading it. Because whether you realize it or not, and Perry alluded to this earlier with the applicant tracking software at ATS, when they submit it, people aren't using one standardized version. Even for example, Indeed.com, it actually, when you submit your resume, it'll convert it. And so I don't know if it still does this now. I know in 2021 it was doing this, where if you had to see things happening again. Let's see. Yeah. See, it's all of them. We need it for the online folks. Let's try now. Yeah. Online, hopefully you can hear me. I don't know. I'll talk out here. In 2021, Indeed was big about taking 2-column resumes and converting it to a single column. And because of that, it was destroying whatever formatting you were having. I hate 2-column resumes anyway. I think you're killing a lot of space and you're not using it correctly. Everyone that has always said, I have to have 2-column, as soon as we get on a call, they realize, whoa, I got way more space utilizing the single. I think you're doing yourself a major disservice by having that. So in my opinion, stick to the single column, stick to the simple design, let your personality flourish. But also, I've said this many times, if you really want to have that designed one, have a nicer design resume that you can hand over. But also, I've also said to people in the past, you need to be catering to the audience that's landing on you. The very first line of hiring, let's try now. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Good. We're good. So when it comes to, you need to cater all of your documentation to the first line of hiring, recruiters and corporate recruiters and people in HR, business folks. The example that I often give is recruiters, for the lack of a better term, they're bus drivers. They aren't technical people because they don't need to be. Their specialty is in people, right? They're finding people, they're sourcing candidates, they're trying to find as many people that match the requirements of a job description to take them to a destination to drop them off with the hopes that people land in seats. That's how they monetize a lot of these relationships. So now that you understand their role in this, cater to it. Make sure your information makes sense to somebody who doesn't come from a technical background. Prime example, I was doing a call with a senior developer who said that they were crashing in interviews. And so we did a couple practice questions, and every single question went into heavy technical areas, right? But the questions I were giving were not from a soft technical perspective. They were from the behavioral side of an interview. You're losing them in that conversation. They don't know what you're talking about. Why haven't you thought about how someone who's not coming from a technical role will understand, comprehend, and think about what it is that you're sharing? Because they're going to be the ones that recommend you for interview number 2. They're going to be the ones that are taking these notes down to, exchange with somebody else. So think about how they're comprehending it, how they're absorbing that information. Because if they don't have a good experience with you, they're not going to recommend you for that next level of the interview. So you need to think about that. But also you need to think about it from their perspective. How deep am I going technically on my resume and LinkedIn? If it's too deep, you may be losing them. You need to talk about those technologies, but talk about it in a way that anybody can understand it. Because the other thing too is people that work at companies know other people that work at companies. Maybe someone in accounting recommends you for an opening and they're your referral into that role. They don't know what the first thing is when you start talking about auth tokens and cookies and session storage. They don't know what you're talking about. But if you're talking about how I worked on the sales funnel of the website and I ended up increasing revenue by 10%, they know what that means. That's something you could talk about. So think about the audience that's landing on your page and who's talking with you. To give you a couple stats to back this up, 87% of companies in the United States utilize LinkedIn at least on a monthly basis when it comes to employment opportunities. That's almost everybody, right? 87%. I always tell people that, if they were at a bar, I tell you go grab a drink. If they were at a restaurant, I tell you go grab a meal. If they're at a gym, I say it's time to pick up a workout routine. Well, they're on LinkedIn. You need to hang out and you need to stand out where they hang out, right? That should be your primary focus. And one of the big things about LinkedIn, because some people are like, I hate social media, I hate LinkedIn. I get it. It's a tool though. And one of the big things about LinkedIn is you land, if you make your profile right, you land in those job searches. These are people that are ready to put people in seats. So they're looking for you and they're looking for those terms and those people. So if you're landing in that search, there's a higher likelihood that that's going to go your way as opposed to you blind applying. Because here's the thing, if you land in 500 job searches, The only way they would have known your name before then was if you applied to 500 locations. That saved you a lot of legwork. Now, I'm not saying don't apply, still apply, but that's something that goes on top of everything else in the process. And so if you're landing in those job searches, if you even convert 5% of those into conversations, you're doing really, really well. The other thing, and why I stress this, and it's going back, I believe Perry said this earlier, actually filling out your entire profile, you should really focus on, even if you invest a couple of days into this, really making your profile stand out and look good. You know why? If I were to DM you right now, you don't know me, we've never spoken before. What do you think is the first reaction you would have? You can say it out loud. If I were to DM you, blue shirt. If I were to DM you, we've never spoken before. How? Right? It's a natural response. I would think the same thing. Who is this? So what's the first thing do you think that they do to that message? They check out your profile. You actually investing time on your profile actually increases the likelihood and rates of replies that you get to your messages, because that's the first thing that they're looking. So even if you don't have the best crafted message in the world, if they check out your profile, there's a higher likelihood that they'll respond to you. And so because of that, it's worth the little bit of effort there. So you should spend that there. By the way, I saw a bunch of y'all already do this, so I'm proud of you. You took photos. For those that don't, you should be taking a photo of yourself here and posting on your LinkedIn, because it's not going to, see, I see a smile. See, look, it's not going to expire, but people really interact with that and they engage with it. You'd be so shocked. And it's an easy win because you're already here anyway. So think about that when you're going to other events as well. Like, showcase to employers, I'm really passionate about learning how to code, and I'm really passionate about this. I'm passionate about tech sales, and I went to this tech sales event. Like, there's a million things that you could be doing to kind of stand out in this process. Anybody want to add anything to this? They said I did a perfect job. So I only want to go for a couple more minutes, but I thought, I don't know how many we can take, but does anybody have a question that they want to ask that we could kind of help out with? Go ahead. You, to ensure I heard you correctly, it's kind of hard to hear. So you said if you have a project that's not complete, but you want to talk about it? I have an answer for this, but let's go to them first before I share my answer. I don't know if my answer matches theirs or not, but I know what I would say to this.
I would say absolutely speak to that. I'd rather hear about something that you're working on currently than something that's outdated that you worked on 2 years ago. So I know that you're keeping your skills fresh, active. While looking for jobs, you're also coding, because I know a lot of people, when they get so in the job search, that becomes their focus and where their energy is, and they kind of coding becomes less of it. So I absolutely want to hear what you're currently working on. And if you're, again, able to tell me about a problem you're solving, something that you're passionate about, that's really something that I want to hear.
I agree. I think most of us probably learn by doing, and telling me about what you're currently learning by doing is really important, versus something you completed months ago and you honestly have kind of forgotten about what did I even really do there. And then I don't know, I'd rather hear about that than like, well, I'm halfway through this certification program, just for what it's worth.
I think that shows your curiosity around technology. It shows your passion, depending on how you deliver it. Like when we're, speaking about like the project that you're working on. So yeah, I would definitely speak about that with the recruiter.
Yeah, so my answer is different. I think you should not bring it up. And the other thing that I would say is, if you're in the position where you're trying to interview and the only thing you can talk about is an unfinished project, I personally think you're not putting yourself in a good position to really do well in these interviews. And you should have at least one rock solid project done. I'm not saying that you need a whole library. I'm not saying that you need 5,000 projects, but you need at least one thing that you can talk about from beginning to end that allows you to highlight your technical abilities, that allows you to showcase that you're a problem solver, and that it's done. And if it's not done and you don't have one good project, you might be slightly too early, and you should finish that one thing. Because while I know we can always say stuff, but and it's not maybe the most social media friendly thing to say, but when you're interviewing, it is a slight competition. and you are competing against other people for those roles, right? I want to make sure that if I'm leaving an impression, it's one that I can accomplish my tasks, I can do some stuff, I can complete stuff. Now, if you're talking about a secondary project, third level, fourth level project, that's fine. Hey, I'm currently working on this, but I have this done and you can talk through it. That's fine. But I want at least, and I don't, I'm stressing this one specifically, at least one good project, right? I'm not saying you followed a YouTube tutorial and you just copied and pasted it, because guess what? Remember how I said cater to your audience? There's 5 rounds of interviews, right? One is going to be with somebody who is business focused. One is going to be a technical interview. One will be a soft technical where they talk about it, right? So majority of those interviews are going to be with technical people. They know the YouTube tutorials. They did it. They did the same projects. And so when you walk in just following a YouTube video that you followed or a Udemy video, they know those projects. And so it doesn't put you in the best position. So for me, my answer is you should have at least one project done. And one thing that I'll say, because I meant to say this earlier with the bad resume thing, stop putting 20 or 30 projects on your resume. We've already established they're only taking a few seconds to scan this resume to see if they're going to spend more time. When you're burying the lead, they're not looking through all that. I'll tell you right now, they're not reading all 20 or 30 projects. They may pick 1 or 2 to glance at and then move on down to the experience and everything else. You're killing space that could be utilized for more important things. 1 project, 2 max, but I strongly urge you to stick to 1 project on your resume, because again, short, sweet, specific. Save the rest for the interview when you can talk about other scenarios, but have that 1 project that you're super proud of on your resume. Everything else should be volunteer, achievements, awards, contributions, job experience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Outside of that, you shouldn't be including that on your resume as far as I'm concerned. But that's the other thing. That's why you're supposed to have a portfolio site and all this other stuff.
That's what I was just going to say is in the design world, maybe I should draw that distinction. Your portfolio should be done. What you're working on now, as far as beyond your beautiful portfolio showcasing that you have already done all these things, that's secondary and again, above and beyond what you're currently learning, but your portfolio should 100% be complete.
Go for it. This is actually, I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to kind of approach this as well. Anyway, so the question that was asked was, what if you have a resume that lacks projects, but has a lot of extracurriculars like student clubs and stuff? Yeah. So I'll go to y'all first if you want to, or I can answer. It's up to y'all. But essentially, the question is, I'm guessing college student or something on that equivalent level. They have a resume, they don't have projects, but they have some extracurriculars that they did, but they're trying to circumvent the not having enough experience for a role.
I would say get that project experience and then come back and apply.
Yeah.
I don't have any experience though. I only have experience, so that could only be 1 section with just 1 experience. And then there's lots of space remaining where I'm doing my volunteer work or extracurricular stuff rather than doing projects. So the number of skills, these stuff are not adding up for the ATS to get me beyond the 80% mark or whatever.
So let me ask them this question before I continue with you, because I already know what I'm going to say. Do you use ATS softwares?
Yes.
Does it auto reject candidates?
Auto reject, no.
Mine does not.
No, ATS does. Okay. And so I even, if you've seen some of my stuff from like 2020, I believe the same thing because I was told the same thing. ATSs don't auto reject. A human being is rejecting you. But what it does is it ranks your resumes. Okay. Now for me, right, I just know human beings, right? And so I know that at 9 o'clock in the morning, when they're on resumes 1, 10, and 20, they're going to have a lot more enthusiasm and empathy than they're going to have at resume 990. That's just being a human being, right? So my goal is to try and rank up as high as humanly possible. But even if you rank low, a human being is still seeing your resume. So I wouldn't worry too much about what it is that you're saying here. But what I would have the focus on is, if you lead a boring life, you can't be like shocked by the results. So if you feel like you're missing something here, create it. Go out there and do it. Go volunteer and do some software work for somebody. Like, and I'm very specific in this because when people hear this advice, what is the first thing that they think? I'm just going to spam everybody. I'll work for free. Don't do that. I'm a big, I'm trying to be very company focused here. Uh, I don't like the terms or usage of unpaid internships, right? But if I'm going to do unpaid work, it needs to be on my terms. And so maybe there's an organization or a homeless shelter or women domestic violence center that I really like that I'd love to work with. And so I'll tell them, hey, if you want, I can make you a website for free. I'll do all the work. I'll maintain it for you. And maybe you're volunteering 5 hours a week or something like that, right? Maybe 5 hours on a Saturday. LinkedIn doesn't need to know that. The recruiters don't need to know that. They just know that you're giving back and helping out, and it's technically focused, right? So if that's something that's you're worried about, that's a way to circumvent that. Now, here's one thing that I will say: if you ever hear we were looking for somebody with more experience, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes that is a soft way to get out saying you have not done enough to really ease a lot of the concerns that we had for the candidates that we're looking for. And so if you're hearing that, you need to really focus on how are you approaching and what are you doing to de-risk yourself as a candidate? Because the reality is you're an investment at the end of the day. And for anyone that's early career here, any company that hires you, they basically know for this first 6 months, you're not really going to be able to contribute to the code base. So they're saying we're going to be losing money for about 6 months. But we see with this candidate, given enough training, given enough resources, given enough mentorship and support, and given our level of standards, that they'll rise to the occasion, and in 6 months, they're going to make some very meaningful contributions. That is going to end up being worth way more than what we're going to end up losing in the 6 month period. So they're not looking for someone that's going to take forever to onboard, forever to train, forever to teach. If they have to teach you to code and then on top of that, now they're waiting for you to contribute, we're talking about a year plus. They're not going to do that. So it is your objective to ease those concerns, de-risk yourself as a candidate, and for the lack of a better term, a stock, and make it easier for them to say, this is the kind of person that I know I can add. And so you need to really be thinking about that long term. How am I de-risking myself and what am I doing? And if I'm not doing that in an effective way, what should I be adjusting? And if you're walking out of conversations and it's not going your way, start thinking, what went wrong? Where did I lose them? And think about that seriously, because if you're getting into those conversations and it's not going your way, there's a big disconnect somewhere. So think about that. If that's an objection that you're hearing, not enough experience, it means that you can have experience without it being technical. You and I tell people this all the time. Like, you have Starbucks, you can talk about contributions that you made that were not technical that would still do really well in a technical interview. So start thinking about that. Volunteer at student organizations. Talk about that. For me, I volunteered at a bunch of meetup groups. I led a meetup group. I led a bunch of workshops. That ended up doing really well for me early on. Hackathons, when I was able to talk about that, that did really well. So talk about those types of things. I think we're good on time. We'll take one more and that's it. Go ahead. We'll go with you. Go ahead.
Earlier you mentioned that it didn't look good to different jobs. What if you stayed in the same company for a while, but you had different roles? So let's say within a frame of about 5 years, you had 6 different roles. Does that count? And also, I'll lead on what is the time frame for hopping jobs? Is it 5 months, 1 year, 2 years?
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, you did really bad by doing really well at your job. So all those promotions just did you wrong, man. No. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So let's say if you
Oh, repeat the question for people online. If you were at a company for a long period of time but had multiple roles, maybe promotions and things like that, you excelled within your field, does that look bad on the resume since you've been moving around in different roles?
that does not look bad. What looks bad is if you were in the same role for 10 years, to be honest. So that shows progression. As long as you are getting promoted when you're with the company for 5+ years, it shows progression. And actually, employers like to see that. Now, it's not likely that people stay at roles for 20 years anymore, but they have. And as long as they were promoted, continuously promoted after whatever time period they were promoted at, employers, they definitely like to see that. But being in the same role for 10 years, no, that's a turn off, to be honest. But nobody would overlook you for, staying at the same company and being promoted. So that does look good.
If I can add to that, I definitely think it's good that you've been at the same company. Longevity looks great. Hopefully, you've moved around and promoted in that time, or they've been good changes. But it doesn't look bad, but it is interesting to me as a recruiter. And so that would be probably the first question I've asked is, I see you've moved around within the same company. Why is that? Why did you leave those roles? Are you someone who every time you joined a team, you got frustrated and you quit because you call every team toxic? Or is it truly because you found a better opportunity and they were growth moves? So be prepared to answer to that. My job as a recruiter is to dig, and try to find those areas where a hiring manager might come back to me and say why you're questionable. So just to kind of reiterate, doesn't look bad, but be prepared to speak to why you made so many moves within that same company.
One thing that I want to add to this, because you said something a little extra that I'm just recalling now, that you said, what is a good time to like move where it's not seen as like job hopping. Everyone's preference on this is going to be different, right? I'm a firm believer, and there's an adage in tech that the fastest way to a raise in tech is by switching positions. It's unfortunate, but it's true, because I worked at companies that I was promoted and I was given a 4% raise. And then I had somebody in my inbox to where they were like, "Hey, we will almost double your salary if you come here." It's like, who am I not having a conversation with for that, right? It's hard not to. I obviously it's going to look bad if your job like hopping jobs every 4 months in the example that he gave earlier. But if you're hopping jobs like every couple of years, I think you're in a fine situation. Now, I'll say this: if you're at a great company and you really like everything that you're doing and you're able to progress, there's nothing wrong with staying longer. But also, if you're in a really, really bad situation, there's nothing wrong with leaving earlier. But if there's a serious repetition of it, that's when you have to start evaluating the moves that you're making. But I think even if you're moving every 2 years, I think that's still fine. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, even some of my job history, I have a little bit of a stint where I was moving every year, but every single time it was for a complete promotion, almost doubling my salary. Like right now, I'm making what 4.5x what I was making when I first got in tech. I wouldn't have been doing that if I stayed at that one company and just took 4% every single time, right? So sometimes those moves have to be very big and meaningful moves in the right direction. So as long as that's what's happening, I'm all for it. Just be ready to talk about it. And everything when it comes to job experience, when it comes to your projects, when it comes to your history of job hopping, everything comes down to how you present it and how you discuss it, right? So if you're just talking about like, yeah, job hop, that's not going to be the conversation that goes your way. But if you end up talking about it thoroughly, like this, I met the ceiling of what I could do here, and I wanted to challenge, and I wanted to move to somewhere better. That's probably going to be something that's favorable in your direction.
So I'll say 2 years is the sweet spot for most companies to stay in a role. Like you said, when you have that consistency, like if you took one bad job and you were only there for 6 months, but then, you left and you're at your current company, you've been there for 2, 3 years, that doesn't look bad. But people can always tell when you've hopped for money, because usually people will go from like a good job and then they'll go to like a startup or like lesser known company because of money. It ended up being a shit show. Excuse my French, but then they'll go to like they'll move to another job, and when that's a continuous track record, like it was a great candidate that I had to like reject, and I actually wanted to. I called him on the phone because I wanted to explain that to him because he was trying to figure out, I've submitted my resume. I don't understand like why I'm not making it past this interview process. Well, he's had 3 jobs. He's had 3 different jobs in the past 3 different years, and he's pretty much left these companies for money. The culture just wasn't good, and sometimes with some roles when they're paying you so much money, it's a reason why they're paying so much money, to be honest, because it's probably not a good position. So as a candidate, you really do want to do your research when you're you definitely want to do your research when you're interviewing, I'm sure.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers that question. I guess that'll be all for the questions. Now, I guess any closing remarks, any final thing
Oh, I
you
know
wanna say?
you raised your hand. Was that you?
It was, but we don't have time.
Go for it. Go.
Just go for it.
Just curious about cover letters. Like, how essential are
No
they?
need.
Whenever I apply, like, it always just optional.
I wouldn't do a cover
You'll
letter.
do it? Okay.
Me personally, I wouldn't. Like,
Yeah.
I've never worked for any employer that like actually read them. Takes too
Total
long.
opposite. I read cover letters. So
Either.
it just really, honestly, if you really, really want that role, and again, you really want to show going above and beyond, I would do it.
I am unfortunately on the opposite of Melissa here. I My belief is this. I will only ever provide a cover letter if it's expressly asked for. Otherwise, I would rather you spend that time going over the job description and making sure that you've answered the concerns in the job description with your resume, because that's going to rank you higher than the ATS. So if I have to spend personal time, that's where I want to spend it on. And to be honest, I'm very against the whole spray and pray method. I've seen it time and time again, countless times. It doesn't work, y'all. Like, a lot of people say, and I'm a big believer in this, you should be customizing your resume for every single role, because every single job description is different and you need to ease those concerns. And so if you're not doing that, you end up at the bottom of the stacks, essentially, right? You're not gonna be in a good position. But the other thing is, so we have a local Discord for this group. I have a global one called Commit Your Code. We have over 13,000 developers in there from all over the world. And this person in particular, actually, they lived in Dallas, which I didn't live in Dallas at the time. And they came in there saying, I've submitted over 2,000 applications and I've only gotten 2 callbacks. I said 1 per 1,000 is terrible. Like, there's a huge disconnect. And so I told him, I said, there's no way that you're customizing your resume for this. You haven't customized your resume for 2,000 applications and only received 2 callbacks. He's like, no, I've got 1. I just send it out. I said, well, that's the problem. He's like, well, it takes too long to customize the resume. I was like, well, it takes too long to apply to 1,000 places to only get 1 callback. So which long do you want? Because I guarantee you, if you're customizing your resume, you're probably going to get 50 to 1 versus 1,000 to 1, right? But the other thing is, if I'm being real with you, I will never ever tell you not to apply to jobs. You should. But the thing that you should really be focused on is networking and having those conversations and communicating. Because there was a study done that I quoted not too long ago. I think it was in 2022. 72% of candidates end up in interview number 1 by way of referral. So that means if 29 people apply for a job or getting interviewed, 21 of them came by way of referral. 8 of them came by way of applying in applications. You have a stronger likelihood, almost 3 times, to actually get in that interview by networking and having conversations. And so that should be a massive focus in your approach. Still apply, but you should still be like, if you're applying for jobs 8 hours a day and things aren't going your way, let's knock it down to 4 and spend 4 hours online networking and see how that goes. I'm not telling you to stop applying. I'll never say that. But see where those conversations take you instead as well. But I personally, unless a role asks for it, I'm never writing a cover letter. Like, it's not what it used to be. Unfortunately, it doesn't hold the weight like it used to. And I can't even begin to tell you how many hiring managers I've talked to where they're like, yeah, I skipped that. Maybe I'll bring it up if they bring it up in the interview. I'll go over it with them. But they're looking for the core items in that resume to determine whether they're calling or not.
I guess that's a good segue into my closing thoughts. Is there are many, many paths up this mountain, y'all, and you will literally hear people say the exact opposite thing. So don't get frustrated by that. Actually be encouraged by that. That means there's more than one way to get there, right? So for me, I look at the cover letters as a chance to, if you're trying to keep your resume down to 1 page or maybe 2, and there's something else you just really feel like I should know, it doesn't have to be, it can be a paragraph on your cover letter, and that's it. It doesn't have to be a giant essay, right? So anyway, just take heart and keep going and persevere, and all your hard work will eventually pay off.
Those are some good remarks. Add me on LinkedIn. Use me as a resource.
Me too.
I recruit for JP Morgan Chase, but don't feel like you can only speak to me if you're applying for my opening at JP Morgan Chase. I'm absolutely, I'm in recruiting because I love what I do. I love looking at resumes, as corny as it is. I love talking with people about interviews, interview questions to ask. So just feel free to leverage myself as a resource, even if you have no interest in working for JP Morgan Chase. I'm in this to build relationships and work with people, keep networking with each other, absolutely flex that muscle, because as Danny said, you want to build up your tech skills, but on the other hand, you also want to build up the skill set that is job interviewing in itself.
So I'll go with the closing remarks here. Number 1, big kudos to these amazing speakers. Like, they donated their time to be here. It means a lot. I mean, obviously, hopefully you've got some value out of this. If not, maybe you weren't paying attention. No, I'm kidding. But no, in all honesty, for me, kind of going back to one thing that I said, this strategy and a lot of this works no matter what industry you're coming from or what industry you're currently in. It doesn't matter if you're a junior, senior, tech lead, all of this stuff applies, right? So regardless of wherever you are right now, this applies. Make sure again, the key word that I mentioned in the beginning, how you're positioning yourself. Because your LinkedIn, your resume, all this stuff, even your networking, it's positioning you for further conversations. How are you doing it? Are you being intentful with it? And I'll tell you this much. At this point, in the last 3.5 years, I've helped thousands land jobs in tech, and it's literally using this exact same method over and over and over again. It just works. And I wish I would be like, oh, it's a cookie cutter response. No, the numbers are there, the metrics are there. Every hiring manager I talk to, they support it because it establishes, not only does it establish a good situation for the hiring manager, it establishes great situations for you to talk about yourself. So that's the whole approach here. And to be honest with you, I came from fried chicken and gas station, y'all. I didn't have a tech background. I seriously didn't. 11 years of my life in that gas station, and I did not have a technical skill set where I could be like, well, I did this, and I definitely made fried chicken and ringing up customers sound good. Don't get me wrong, but that was the extent of what I had, right? I had my project that I had. I had all the meetups that I went to. I had all those connections there. I'll be honest with you. I really didn't apply to a lot of jobs. It all came by way of conversation. And you know what ended up like being the thing that got it for me? I was standing in the gas station one day, and to be honest, I was terrified. And to be honest, I even sabotaged my own entry into tech. I totally get it. I acknowledge it now. But I sabotaged myself. And I said, it clicked for me one day. I said, the chances of me meeting any of these hiring managers or recruiters at these Fortune 500 companies was literally zero, right? They're never going to know I exist unless I give them a reason to acknowledge that I exist. They're not walking in my gas station. So if I reach out to them and they say no, I'll literally never meet them. What do I have to lose at this point? Right? Like, seriously, what do I have to lose? What happens if they say no now? I'll never see them face to face, so why not? So I started reaching out to them, and I'd reach out and I fixed up my LinkedIn to what I thought was good at the time, which it really wasn't, and I took more iterations. But I started reaching out to them, and I'd reach out to these hiring managers and recruiters at these big organizations. And I lived in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, so it wasn't really a tech town. It wasn't a ton of opportunities in that regard. We did barbecue. We didn't really do tech. But I promise you, I was reaching out to them. In the beginning, they're like, who the hell is this Danny guy? Now they're like, oh, I love Danny. I knew Danny from the beginning. We go way back. But that never would have happened unless I started getting out of my comfort zone a little bit and having those conversations, giving them something to recognize and remember. And what's funny is I was going to a lot of those meetups. I was like, I saw you at that meetup. But you know what was interesting? People that were also at the meetup that were in the photos, they were like, I saw you on LinkedIn somewhere and I don't know why. And then they were realizing, oh, I saw you through a picture that was being shared. It goes a long way. And to be honest with you, I sabotaged myself for so long. And I'll tell you this, and I'll end on this point. I'd literally leave the gas station to go to interviews, right? And I had the craziest level of imposter syndrome where my skin would crawl and like I almost like talking myself out of these opportunities. I remember sitting in an office and like my mind's racing. I've never seen the inside of an office. This is like one of the first times ever. The only idea I had of an office was what I saw on TV, right? I'd never been inside one. And so I'm in this office building, I'm freaking out, I'm nervous and I'm sweating. It's even though it's December, like I'm sweating, it's crazy. And I'm just talking to myself like, Danny, you don't need to be here. You go to these meetups, everyone's got degrees. You don't have a degree. You don't need to be in this conversation. They want someone more qualified than you. They want somebody more experienced. Then you don't need to be here. This room already smells like fried chicken. What are you doing in here? Get out of here. Get out. You don't belong here. And I'm so damn grateful that I didn't listen to my insecurities, my doubts, even the people in my family that doubted me. I'm Danny Thompson. I'm a software engineer. There's space for you in this industry. And I can't wait to see all the new things that you do. Thank you for being a part of this. So the way we end these things every single time is we kind of always take like a big group photo at the front. I don't ever force you to be a part of it if you don't want to be, but pretty much everyone always is. So if you want to, please come to the front. We'll take one quick photo and then you can kind of network before we end the night. And online, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate it. We're going to call it a wrap on this one since we don't have a screen behind us for the online attendees to be a part of the photo, but we'll definitely see you guys on the next one. Thank you.